Good evening, everyone. We're in the middle of Siman Dal Iggeres HaKodesh, page Kuf Hey, which is opposite of page 208. This letter begins with the words Ein Yisrael Negolan Ela B'Tzedakah, which means that the Geula will only come b'schus the mitzvah of tzedakah. So we need to understand what is the connection between Geula and specifically tzedakah. So to understand that, we first have to understand what Geula is. We started this conversation last week already. What is Geula? And to understand what Geula is, the Alter Rebbe introduces this idea that in the heart, there are two parts to the heart. There's Pnimiyus Halev, there's Chitzonius Halev. There is the internal part of the heart, the external part of the heart. And there are two loves, two different types of loves. One is a love associated with Chitzonius Halev, the external part of the heart. One is a love which is associated with Pnimiyus Halev, the internal part of the heart. And we talked about this last week. The love of the Pnimiyus Halev, the Ava which a person has, which comes from Pnimiyus Halev, is not an acquired love. We all know the famous story or legend about the Rambam, whether or not it actually happened or not. The story remains about how the Rambam was once in a conversation with another one of the ministers who claimed that an animal can be trained to behave exactly like a human being. And the Rambam insisted that it's not possible. And the waiter took him up, this other minister took him up on a challenge, and he took a cat and he trained for a long time, I don't know, months, years, he trained this cat to be a waiter. And the day comes, and this minister wants to show the Rambam how he had proven him wrong. He invites the Rambam to a meal. I guess he koshered the kitchen for the occasion. And the Rambam sits down together with some other people, all were gathered for this great spectacle to show how the Rambam is completely wrong. And out of the kitchen walks, on his two hind legs, walks the cat, and is wearing an apron and holding a platter of a food. And for the first part of the meal, everything is going swimmingly well, and the waiter is doing his job mamish like a human being. But when comes one of the courses, and one of the middle courses, the Rambam pulls out of his pocket, he pulls out a mouse. Don't ask me why the Rambam had a mouse in his pocket. And he sends it, and he lets it go, and it goes scampering, and the waiter sees it, and the platter goes crashing down to the ground, and it goes off chasing the mouse, and the point was made. The same thing is also in terms of us as human beings. There are certain things that are essential qualities and traits and desires that we have, and then there are acquired tastes that we have. Acquired loves that we have. They're acquired through our experiences in life. They're acquired through our the information that we've gained over our years on what's good and what's not good. We become smarter, so we figure out what pays and what doesn't pay. So these are all acquired tastes. They're not essential. There was a time before we had these loves and these desires in life. Theoretically, these loves and desires could change if the circumstances change, because they're not essential. That's Chitzonius Halev. And Pnimiyus Halev is the essential desires that we have. And this is true both in Kedusha and Lahavdil, also in L'Umazah, on the other side. In Kedusha, there's a love for Hashem which is an acquired love, a love which is a product of our Hisbodinus, a product of our awareness and our experience, our knowledge of Hashem, and our contemplating Hashem's greatness and Hashem's kindness. That's an acquired love. And as important as that love is, and it is very important, but ultimately it doesn't have the strength and the power. You might even want to say the infinite power, which the Pnimiyus Halev has. The Pnimiyus Halev is the Ava which every single one of us has for Hashem, not because it's not al pi cheshbon, it's not al pi seichel, it's not al pi tam vadas, it's not logical, it's not because we made any sort of calculation that Hashem is good for me for this, or good for me for that, or Hashem is great. It's just an essential love which every single Yid has from Hashem. In the words that Alter Rebbe uses, V'hihi b'chinas nitzutz elokus shebechol nefesh mi Yisrael. It is the spark of godliness which is within every single Yid. That is the Pnimiyus Halev. And Dr. Rebbe also spoke about the fact that this is also true in the Ummah. It's also true in worldly matters. There are certain desires and goals and aspirations that we have, which are logical, and they're based on our experience, and they're based on our maturity and our understanding and our thinking and our figuring out what works and what doesn't work and what's good and what's not good. And all these desires that we have, ultimately, they're limited. Because they're limited, how powerful are these desires? As powerful as their cause, their logical reason. And no logical reason is infinite. And then, in this world, we have also, there are certain desires that we have that we are completely immersed in the world, and it's beyond logic. Certain things that we want and we desire, it's not because of any reason, but it's something which comes from the core of the Nefesh HaBahamis, the very core. This is what I want. And therefore we do crazy, stupid things in order to attain these goals, even though they're not logical, because you have to understand, if the desire isn't logical, so then the means towards achieving this desire also don't have to be logical, and people can self-sabotage and do crazy, stupid things to achieve these desires and goals. Why is that? Because these are Pnimiyas Alev, the Pnimiyas Alev of the Nefesh HaBahamis. That's what we learned about last week. The question that was asked last week by Reb Ruven, who always preempts and asks the questions before we bring them up in class, is, the question is, that's great, so I have a Avas Hashem B'Chitzoniyas Alev, I have a Ava for Hashem B'Pnimiyas Alev, but why don't I feel the Ava in the Pnimiyas Alev? And how do I access it? So let's do inside page Kufay, 2 lines from the bottom, and it's the opposite of page 208. Page Kufay, Uma She'en Kol Adam. Uma She'en Kol Adam Zoich LaMadrega Zu. And the fact that not every person is Zoichet to this Madrega. La'avoida Shabalev, the Avoida of the heart, Mu'umka Deliba, from the depths of the heart, Bebechinas Pnimiyas, from the Pnimiyas of the heart. Hainu Lefi, this is because Shebechina Zuhi Etzli Bebechinas Galus V'Shivya. That this level by the person is in Galus. It's in exile, V'Shivya, it's in captivity. Yes, it is trapped in captivity. In other words, by every single yid that exists, it's not a question of, do I have it, do I not have it? But by most of us, this Avas Hashem, which is from the Pnimiyas Halev, by us is in Galus V'Shivya. It's in exile, it's in captivity. The definition of being in captivity is that you exist in an uncorrupted form. You're there, it's you, but you're not free to express yourself. You're not free to behave as you wish. You are subject to the whims and the desires of your captors. And the same thing is also by us, the Nekudas Halev, the Pnimiyas Halev of the Nefesh Alikis is in Galus. It's in Galus within a person. V'hi bechines Galus Hashchina Mamish. And this is Galus Hashchina. This is something that we've encountered several times in Tanya, which is that in general we talk about how when Yidden went into Galus, so Hashem also goes into Galus with us. So usually we talk about that more in a global sense. Klal Yisrael goes into Galus, so therefore that drags Hashem into Galus also. But as we know that everything that's true in a global sense is also true on a personal level. And every single one of us, we have a little piece of the Shechina inside of us. We have this nitzutz, the spark of Hashem inside of us, the neshama, which is the Pnimiyas Halev, the Pnimiyas Halev of the Nefesh Alikis. And when it is dragged into Galus, that is Galus HaShechina. We're talking here about the spark of godliness which is within the Nefesh Alikis. And it's in Galus. Nu Ruven, what's the next question?
What's locking it up?
Well, exactly. How did it get into Galus? How did it get into Galus? V'sibas Galus, the reason for the Galus is Maimer Razal.
Galu.
As Chazal tell us, Galu leBavel Shechina Iman. That when Yidden go into Bavel, so Shechina goes with them. The reason why the Shechina is with us is because we went into Bavel. Now what did we do? We took the essence of our being, and instead of investing it in Kedusha, we invested it in Klippa. The Hainu meaning, Belavushim Tsoyim, Dimili da Alman, the soiled garments of worldly matters, the Taivas Elam Haza, and the Taivas of this world, Hanikra B'Shem Bavel, which is called Bavel. Now I don't know why it's called Bavel. Actually, looked a little into it. Well, what's up is Dafka Bavel, not any other, but Lepoil Bavel is in Chutz La'aretz. It's a place not Eretz Yisrael. And when we enter Bavel, when we go to a place which is outside of Eretz Yisrael, we become trapped in Taivas Elam Haza. So then our Pnimius Alev is in Golus.
Right, in Eretz Yisrael, they don't have Tavot Ha'olam Hazeh? I don't need to
Eretz Yisrael represents the word, the reason why Lama Nikra Shema Eretz Sheratzitza Lases Ritzayin Koina. Eretz Yisrael represents the idea of a desire to do what Hashem wants. And if you're in Eretz Yisrael and you're doing the opposite of that, then you're not in Eretz Yisrael. You're schlepping Chutz La'aretz with you. That's all you're doing.
Could you bring Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz?
Absolutely. That's what we're doing right now over here. Yes. Yeah. The Rebbe speaks about this. The Rebbe speaks about this very strongly. People want to go to Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe screamed at them and said, "You don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. You want to take Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael with you. That's all you want to do. Eretz Yisrael is Artzeinu HaKodesh. You want to go for the kedusha, or do you want to go?" And if you're not going for the kedusha, you're not going to Eretz Yisrael. You're just bringing Chutz La'aretz together with you, which is a busha and a charpa that in the king's palace you're schlepping in from the outside. So let's digest a little of that which we've just spoken about. First of all, the question, which is, why aren't we zoicha to this? The question with which we began, the fact that we're not all zoicha to this madrega, there seems to be this assumption that we should be zoicha to it, and we have to have a reason why we're not zoicha to it. What is the basis for this assumption? The basis for the assumption is that this is one of the differences between Pnimius Alev and Chetzonius Alev. In Chetzonius Alev, every single one of us, our Avos Hashem, is different. Because Chetzonius Alev is a product of my understanding and a product of my experience. My understanding is not your understanding. My experience is not your experience. So it's understood that if you're talking about the Ava, which is the acquired Ava, the acquired taste love for Hashem, it's understood that every one of us is going to be different. And by the way, if someone never thought about the greatness of Hashem, that person won't have any Avos Hashem. There are differences there. When it comes, however, to Pnimius Alev, so over there we say that what? That the Ava Pnimius Alev comes because of the Nitzutz Elikus, the spark of godliness which is within every single one of our neshamas. Over there is no difference between one yin and the next. The biggest tzaddik and the biggest rasha, in terms of the Nitzutz Elikus, in terms of the spark of godliness, which is within the Nefesh Elikis, there is no difference. A yid is a yid is a yid. You can't be more of a yid, you can't be less of a yid. A big tzaddik isn't more a yid, more Jewish than a big rasha. Might be more accomplished yid, but not more of a yid. Nitzutz Elikus we all have equally. So since the Ava, which comes from Pnimius Alev, is a result of the Nitzutz Elikus, so the question, Ma she'ein kol adam zoicha lazeh, is a valid question. So why aren't we all zoicha to this Ava? We all have it. And the Alter Rebbe answers and says, why don't we all have zoicha to it? Because we're busy with the Pnimius Alev of the Nefesh HaBahamis. And here the same distinction applies. If you're talking about the Ava of Chetzonius Alev, so Ava for Chetzonius Alev, I could love 50 different things, and it's not a contradiction. Even if those things are contradictory to each other, we all know this from our experience. That we like one thing, we like A, and we like B, and someone comes, well, second, but A and B are contradictory to each other. And you're like, yeah, and I like both of them. Right? That's a normal part of life. That's why we say the grass is always greener on the other side. So if the grass is greener on the other side, why are you on this side? Why aren't you on that side? The answer is because you're here because you elected here. But the problem is that when you're here, you realize, but there's something else on the other side, which I can't have. Okay, by the way, you know what's going to happen if you hop to the other side?
You're going to go back.
They can say the grass is greener on the other side, right? You got all these married people who kvetch, the virtues of being single. And go to a single person, the virtues of being married. Yeah, because we want to have the stability of marriage, every single one of us, and the bracha that it is. But people also want to have a little freedom on the side, right? And you can want both things, and they're contradictions to each other, and that's fine. And why is that? Because if your desires are based on logic, so there can be reasons to like this, and there can be reasons to like that. Right? So it could be a reason why you want to eat the chocolate cake, and there could be a reason why you don't want to eat the chocolate cake, and therefore you want both at the same time. And it doesn't mean that you're schizophrenic. It just simply means that in the Chesenius Alev, if your love is because of different cheshbainis, it can lead you in different directions. But the Ava of Pnimius Alev, you can't have two contradictory desires. Ava of Pnimius Alev is not something I have. It's not an Ava or a desire I have. It's who I am. Do I want this or do I want that? I can't want both. If my reason, again, if my love is based on desire, on logic, then it can be logical to want this, it can be logical to want that. And I can want both of them. But if we're talking about the Ava, which is L'mayla Matam V'das, the Ava, which is beyond Seichel, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Where are you? What is your desire? What do you want? I can't say I want this and that. No. This and that means I have reasons for this, reasons for that. But we're not talking about a reason about an Ava, which is Al Pi Seichel. And therefore, because we invest our essence in Taivas Olam Haza, that automatically means that the Pnimius Alev of the Nefesh Elokis is going to be in Galus. Because you can't be both. It's one or the other. What is my desire? Is my desire world or is my desire Hashem? And it can't be both. On the level of Chesenius Alev, it can be both. I can want Hashem and the chocolate cake. On Pnimius Alev, I have to figure out, am I right now being a vehicle for the Pnimius Alev of my Nefesh Elokis, or am I being a vehicle for the Pnimius Alev of Nefesh Bahamis? Who am I? There's a sikha which relates to this topic, and I believe that I've said this sikha in the past. So therefore Reuven probably remembers it, but for the sake of the others who maybe don't, we'll a little chazara. There's a pasuk that says, "Vayimaru es chayehem ba'avoda kasha." Parsha of 2 weeks ago, that the Mitzrayim embittered the lives of the Yidden ba'avoda kasha with difficult work. And the Rebbe asks a question: how do you embitter the life of a Yid? The life of a Yid is kedusha, is holiness. How do you embitter the holiness of a Yid? And the Rebbe explains, what did the Mitzrayim, and this is true in a practical sense, but even more so in a spiritual sense. We know that it says the Mitzrayim made the Yidden do avodas perach. What is avodas perach? So it's translated commonly as hard, rigorous, back-breaking labor. The word perach actually means to break. It means to break. Welcome. So how do you define avodas perach? So most of us say, so the Yidden, they were schlepping stones and they were building pyramids, whatever they were doing. That's manual, difficult labor, the schlepping, and that they probably work for many, many hours. But interestingly, according to halacha, that's not the definition of beferach. There's a halacha benegate in Hilchas Avadim. The Torah says, "Leisirda by befarach." We're not allowed to work with an eved befarach. If you have an eved, you have a servant, you're not allowed to assign to the servant avodas perach. Okay, so since it's a halacha, we need to quantify. What is that? If I have an eved, what kind of work am I not allowed to tell him? If I need to build a house, am I not allowed to tell him to build to schlep the stones? What are the work hours? Do I have to contact OSHA? Is that the right organization, government organization? What?
Maybe it means degrading work.
So the halacha is, and as defined in the Rambam, that avodas perach. Reuven, you remember this sikha? Somewhat. It's avoda she'ein lo kitzva ve'ein lo toyelas. It's work that has no end and has no use. It has no purpose. What did the Mitzrayim do? They made the Yidden do work which was pointless, because we know Pishem and Ramses, they were built on unstable ground, and when the Yidden would build, it would crumble. It would sink into the ground. So why were the Mitzrayim making the Yidden do it? Not because they needed it, but because they wanted to make the Yidden work hard. Avodas perach is to do work, a work which doesn't have any end to it. Ein la kitzva, it has no limit to it. Ve'ein la tiyalas, it has no point. And those two are connected. When a work has a tiyalas, if there's a point to the work, So then there's a kitzvah, then there's a limit. Why? Because when you arrive at the teyelas, you arrive at the objective, then the work ends. But what if the work has no teyelas? If the work has no objective, then there's no in la kitzvah. It also has no limited also. So according to halacha, if I have a servant and I'm building a house, I'm beferish allowed to tell my servant to schlep the stones. But if there's a break because the construction suppliers didn't deliver the stones, and I'm looking at my servant out there and he's just lying on the lawn over there, and he's getting a tan, I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. He shouldn't be doing nothing. So I tell him, do me a favor, heat me up, go to the stove and heat me up a cup of water. No, I don't need the cup of water. That's avodas parach, and that's not allowed. Because that's avodah she'ein la kitzvah ve'ein la te'ela. So that the schlepping the stones is fine. But the heating up the water, which requires almost zero effort, that's avodas parach. That's an avodah that breaks a person. You know the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, they would do that to the Yidden. They would make them haul, not heat water, haul stones up and down mountains just. And there's nothing worse than doing work which has no
LTOs.
I have another thought about Avodat Perech. I don't know if will agree. When the Mitzrayim made the Yidden work Avodat Perech, they work a lot of hours, so much for nothing, so they don't have time to take a Torah, a Chumash to learn. It's Avodat Perech.
That's nice, but that's not the definition given by the Rambam. That was another byproduct, but that's not what the Rambam is saying.
Well, how does that relate to backbreaking?
Perach means it breaks.
Right. How does it break?
It breaks a person when their work that they're doing is useless. Yes, the morale.
Morale.
Yeah.
But didn't it say that the Yidden built the cities, the towns, or whatever? That wasn't purposeless.
It was purposeless because, as we mentioned before, the ground was unstable on this, and whatever they built would sink into the ground. Okay. The Rebbe says something interesting. The Rebbe says, "Avodah she'ein la kitzvah ve'ein la tiyalas," work which has no limit and has no objective, is the rightful domain of the nefesh halikis. When I serve Hashem, there is no limit to the work, and there is no objective to the work. Why do I serve Hashem? Because I want to serve Hashem. In the words of the Alter Rebbe that he says in a Maimer, he says, "Ilu nistavinu lachte ve'etzim." If instead of giving us 613 beautiful mitzvahs, the Eibishter told us we had one mitzvah, which is every day you have to take our axes and go out to the forest before Zman chopping wood, and chop wood all day until Tzesek Kechavim, and then leave the wood there and go back home, and then tomorrow go and tackle a different area of the forest, and there was no purpose whatsoever. We would do that with the same simcha. Why is that? Because you go to the Nefesh Elokis, and you ask Nefesh Elokis, what do you want to do? He says, I want to serve Hashem. And you say, okay, that's great, Nefesh Elokis, but what are you trying to accomplish? Nothing. I'm not trying to accomplish anything. So when are you going to be finished this? In other words, when will you have felt that you have? Never. As long as I'm living, I am going to serve Hashem, and that's all I want. And then you tell Nefesh Elokis, let me explain to you the objective of what you're doing. And Nefesh Elokis says, no, I'm not interested in hearing. Don't hack me a chaynik. Why am I serving Hashem? Because I love Hashem and I want to serve Hashem. That's Pnimiyas Halev, not Chetzenius Halev. Chetzenius Halev is calculations and reasons. What am I accomplishing? What am I achieving? What is the limit? What are my benchmarks? Right? In the Pnimiyas Halev, there's no such thing. So Avodas Perach, Avodah she'ein la kitzvah ve'ein la tiyalas is the rightful domain of the Nefesh Halikis. And what did the Mitzrayim do? They took this property of the Nefesh Halikis, Avodah she'ein la kitzvah ve'ein la tiyalas, and they directed it towards worldly matters instead of Torah and mitzvahs where it belongs. And that's why Yemaru was Chayayim. That's how they embittered the life. They diverted this very special energy, this Pnimiyas Halev energy, which is supposed to be for Hashem only and not for this world, and they diverted it for worldly matters. And that's how did they do it? By making them
they knew that this is...
And they knew this because there's the idea of Afal Gav De'iu Lechazi Mazlayo Chazi, which means that whatever, even though we don't see things, but Lamaila, their neshama sense something. What is the idea of Mitzrayim? Mitzrayim means that a person goes and that we go to work and we say, how many hours of work am I putting into the office today? I don't know. As many as I need. There's no kitzvah. I need to make more money. Now, truth is, this is ein la tiyalas. There's no tiyalas. There's no point in this. Why? Because you could work 20 hours a day, but you're not going to make a cent more than Hashem has preordained for you. So it's ein la kitzvah ve'ein la tiyalas, and that's Golus Mitzrayim. Golus Mitzrayim is when we are involved in this world without any limits, and without even realizing it's also without really any objective. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here. This is the idea of Yimaros Chayim. You want to know why you don't feel the Pnimiyas Alev for Hashem? It's because your Pnimiyas Alev is invested in this world. This is what the Mitzrim have done to you. They've taken this Pnimiyas Alev, your desires, your purest essential desires, which should be only for Hashem. Instead, you've diverted it. And you're expressing your essential Pnimiyas Nefesh Bahamis, and it does not allow for the expression of the Nefesh Elikis. And that's why the Pnimiyas Alev of the Nefesh Elikis is in Galus. So the question was, why don't we feel the Pnimiyas Alev? It's because you are channeling the Pnimiyas Alev of your Nefesh Bahamis. So what do we do about that?
If we reverse it, then Mashiach's going to come?
Sorry?
If we reverse it, then Mashiach's going to come?
If we reverse it, Mashiach is here.
Oh, so if Mashiach is here, we
No. Let me, the depth in what I just said. What is Mashiach? What is Geula? Geula is the revelation of the Pnimiyas Alev, of Klal Yisrael. And for an individual, Geula is the revelation of the Pnimiyas Alev within him or herself. When your Pnimiyas Alev is revealed, and you have that Ava to Hashem, you're living Geula. That is Geula. It's not like, if that happens, Mashiach will come. If that happens, Mashiach's here. That is Geula. We have to grow up a little in our understanding of what Geula is. Oh, we do our work, and Hashem says, oh, here's the Geula. No, our work is the work that makes the Geula happen. But how do we do this? And the answer is, we need to have a Brismilla. I think I mentioned last week that in this letter we are going to learn about the spiritual significance of Brismilla, and without further ado, let's see how Alter Rebbe explains it.
How many lines?
We are holding V'hi Bechinas Arla. 7 lines from the top of page 210. V'hi, and this. These Taivas Eilam Haza. All these things that are blocking our, and are not allowing our Pnimiyas Alev of Nefesh Elikis to reveal itself, is Bechinas Arla. That is the foreskin. HaMechasa al HaBris, which is covering up the bris, Unukuda HaPlimis Shebalev, and the most innermost point of the heart, the love for Hashem. Okay, so now we're making associations over here. We have the bris. What is the bris? What does the bris represent? What is a bris? A covenant.
Connection.
What is the point of a covenant? The point of a covenant is explained many times in Chassidus, is the idea of l'mayla matam v'das. So let's say I like someone. Reuven, I like you, right? Good. Do we need to make a bris?
No.
Why not?
It's l'mayla min a bris.
The assumption is you're a nice guy. I like you today. You'll probably be a nice guy tomorrow and a year from now, right? Okay. If the course runs, if it runs on its natural trajectory, we'll remain friends, right?
Yeah.
So what is the function of a bris? What is the point of a bris?
It's a contract, some form of a contract.
Why do you need to make a contract? So should we make a contract that we're friends?
No.
No.
It's counterproductive.
So when is a bris made? So let's talk about, give an example. We're in Torah, do you have an example of a bris?
something changes.
What?
One person.
So bris ben Absarim. So what happens over there? Bris ben Absarim, we have Avram and Hashem. And Hashem tells Avram, listen, Avram, I love you. Right? Ato Hashem Elokim asher bacharta ba'Avram. Avraham Oyavi, Hashem calls Avram the one who he loves. But you know what? And I want to be friends with you, your children, your grandchildren forever and ever. But I'm worried. What am I worried about? I'm worried about And a few thousand years or a few hundred years might go by, and I might lose my love for you guys. They might behave in ways that are not conducive to me loving them. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a bris. A bris means it doesn't make a difference what's going to happen. Our connection is an essential connection, which is going to be illogical. In other words, even if a time comes when logically our love should dissipate or go away, or I shouldn't love you anymore, bris is a super rational commitment
Supernatural.
to one another. Or another example, you have David and Yonasan, they made a bris with each other. They loved each other. But I think they were very aware that the day might come in the future when they would be at odds with each other. There was one throne, and both of them were definitely candidates for that throne. And therefore they said, they were worried that the day might come when logic might say they shouldn't be friends anymore. So they said that, we're stopping that right here, we're making a bris. A bris means it doesn't make a difference what one we're, it doesn't make a difference what logic is going to say, we're making...
Logical reason.
So a bris means creating a bond which transcends logic. The day might come when my mind might say not to love you anymore, there isn't a reason to love you anymore, and nevertheless I love you anyways. So the bris represents the Pnimis Halev. What is the Pnimis Halev? Pnimis Halev is the Ava for Hashem, which is L'mayla B'Tamadas. So that this bris that we have is covered by an Arla. And what is the Arla? Which, as we said, the Pnimis Halev is in Galus within the Taivas Elamazah. So all the Taivas that we have, all our worldly attachments that we have, are the Arla that's covering up the bris inside. And therefore the pasuk says, "Umaltem eis arlas levavchem." The pasuk says that we need to circumcise the arla of our heart. You know, we know every single mitzvah, every physical mitzvah, is in reality is something which is represents a spiritual idea. So if we have the mitzvah of Brismilla physically, so there's a spiritual idea. But what's unique over here about the mitzvah of Brismilla, we find that the spiritual concept of Brismilla, we don't find it in Ashala or in the Tanya or in Asfas Emes. The Torah says, "Umalta meis arlas levavchem." I want you to know that just like there's the physical arla which has to be removed, in the Torah itself, it tells us there's also "Umalta meis arlas levavchem," which obviously doesn't mean open heart surgery. It's a spiritual avodah, which means there is your heart, there's the Pnimis Halev, and there's an arla on the heart, and that has to be removed. Umalta meis arlas levavchem. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Are you familiar? There's a pasuk called Malta meis arlas levavchem. There's another pasuk which refers to arlas halev. Anyone knows it offhand? You're good with psukim. Just give you a clue, a hint. It has to do with the month of Elul. It's one of the Rashi Tevisin of the word Elul in the Torah. No. Umal Hashem Elikecha Slavavcha Veslavav Zarach. Right? So you have one pasuk that says Umaltem Eis Arlas Lavavchem, and another pasuk that says Umal Hashem Elikecha Slavavcha. So this is a little bit of a contradiction, no? Rabbi Yisai. What's the contradiction over here? One pasuk says
you yourself have to do
there. One pasuk says "Umalta meis arlas levavchem," that you have to remove the arla.
The other one, Hashem, will malit levavchem.
That's by the cool.
Rabbi say. And the other one says "Umal Hashem alikechas levavchem," that Hashem is the one who does it. Do we do it or does Hashem do it? So the Rebbe is going to tell us that there are two parts to the milah. This milah, which we're talking about, the removal of the taivas or lamaza, there are two parts to it. One part we do and one part Hashem does. Let's do this inside.
Yeah, I guess.
When it comes to milah, there are two levels, and there are two parts, two stages in milah. There's milah upriya. Shehein arla gasa uklipa daka. There's milah and priya. The milah is to remove the arla gasa, and the priya is to remove the klipa daka. So milah is there's the thick skin, the foreskin, and for that you have milah. And afterwards, there's priya, there's a very thin skin, a membrane, which covers up the milah after the foreskin is removed, and that has to be removed. I believe the male does it with his nails. I've never seen a Brismilla, but...
Folds it over, I think. Oh, great.
That's the difference between us and the Muslims. They will do Priya.
I've never studied Islamic law.
I heard this.
Right? Baal Kapanim, that's... So milah is taking off the thick foreskin. Priya, which literally means revealing, that's where the word the priya comes from, is removing the small little, the thin layer. The same thing is ba'ar las halev. When it comes to the arla of the heart, yesh gamkin, there's also these two. There's taivas gases vidakos. Now we're hitting the gut. There are grubbe taivas, the lowly, shameful, coarse taivas that we have, and then there's the edel taivas that we have.
What could be edel?
What could be edel? So you have one person who sits down and takes a loaf of bread and crams it with meat and condiments, and that's a taiva gasa. That's a. And then there's the other person who sits very daintily and eats their broccoli. But that's not a taiva. It's a taiva. It's a taiva daka. It's a edel taiva. In life, we have the taivas gasas, the taivas that we don't want to tell anyone about. And then there's the taivas nakas. There's the edel taivas. We're even proud of our edel taivas. You know what I enjoy? Classical music, and art, and fine wine. I enjoy an aged scotch, not the garbage scotch. Okay, aged scotch, right? These are the finer taivas, the taivas dakis that we have. But at the end of the day, let's do insight. And we need to get rid of all the taivas. In other words, we need to get rid of all our attachments to the world. It doesn't make a difference if it's a grubba attachment, or if it's an edel attachment, a refined attachment, or an unrefined attachment. Every attachment to the world is a arla which doesn't allow for the bris, for the primus aleif to be revealed. Umal v'lei para ki ilu leimal. You did the Brismilla, but you didn't do the priya. Api alacha, nothing happened. Why? Mipnei shesoif adayin nekudas primus aleif hi mechusa belevush sak dak bebechinas galot v'shivi. At the end of the day, you did the milah. You didn't do priya. At the end of the day, the primus aleif, your avat Hashem, is still covered. What does it make a difference? It's covered with a thick skin or thin skin. Either way, it cannot express itself. So if the priya didn't happen, the mitzvah wasn't done. V'hinei al milah sa'ar lamamish, to take off the thick skin ksiv umaltem es ar las levavchan. That's what the pasuk says. That you have to do. Get rid of your disgusting taivas, your lowly taivas, your shameful taivas. Get rid of them. Atam ba'atzmachem, you yourselves. However, lahasar aklipa daka, to take off the thin taivas, to take off the edel taivas, to get rid of your attachment to broccoli. Zehu davar akash ala adam. That's something which is hard. In other words, to totally divest from the world. Not only to divest from taivas shalom haza, the grubbe taivas, but pashat, not to be attached to this world. That everything about me should be l'Hashem levadai. That's something which is very difficult. Regarding this, it says, when Mashiach comes, Umal Hashem elikechas levavcha chulu, that Hashem does this milah. And as the pasuk continues over there, La'avas Hashem elikecha, what's going to result, what's going to cause? When Umal Hashem elikechas levavcha, when Hashem circumcises our heart, you're going to love Hashem b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshcha l'man chayecha. You're going to love Hashem with all your heart and your soul. Why? L'man chayecha. Because you recognize that Hashem is your life. Kaleimar, leman ki Hashem levadei hu kachecha mamish. We will have that awareness that Hashem is our life. And just like when we love, our desire for life, is that a rational desire? Our love for our own life, is that a rational desire? No. A person doesn't think, do I want to live, do I not want to live? Let me make a Venn chart. Okay, here are 5 reasons why I want to live. Here are 6 reasons why I don't want to live. And every day you make a... No, you want to live. Everyone wants to live. Even chas v'shalom, someone who commits suicide, they want to live. Elamah, they're living in great pain. And the desire to live is the most powerful thing there is. When Mashiach comes, and we'll have him, when Hashem does the priya in our heart, then what's going to be revealed? Ha'avat Hashem l'man chayecha, this most powerful love to Hashem. We are going to associate Hashem with life itself. And once we associate Hashem with Kihu chayecha, then automatically that Ava is the most powerful Ava that there is. Sholachein Avazu, and therefore this love, because this love, Himu'umka deliba, from the depths of the heart, Menukuda Primis Mamish, from the innermost center of the heart canal. Ulamayla Bechinas Hadas, and Mashiach, and it's also this idea of Geula, as we mentioned, is higher than Das. It's higher than a love which comes from calculation or from understanding or intellect. And now the Alter Rebbe says something interesting. V'lachein, and therefore, Mashiach ba b'hasach hadas, l'klalos Yisrael. You know, it says that Ein Mashiach ba ela b'hasach hadas. Mashiach comes only hesach hadas. What does hesach hadas mean? Pashut.
You don't think about it.
You don't think about it, right? Okay, so people used to come to Tanya Lubavitch. Why are you screaming? You want Mashiach? No, you're stopping Mashiach from coming.
There's no hesach hadas.
No hesach hadas. Every time you think about Mashiach, you're delaying him a little further. The Rebbe addressed this on several occasions. The Rebbe mocked the question, actually. The Rebbe, really? Open up your siddur, look through Shemona Esrei. And how many times we're asking and begging for Mashiach? Yiddishkeit is not a hesach hadas. We're not asked. Achakale is not hesach hadas. And when a person passes away, one of the first questions that he's asked, the Gemara says, in Masechta Shabbos is, Sipisa Yeshua, right? What does Sipisa mean?
Look forward.
Look for, anticipate, hope. Wait, that's not hesach hadas. So what does it mean? Ein Mashiach bala b'hesach hadas. If one moment suddenly we're doing what we're not supposed to be doing, when we're not thinking about Mashiach, when we're not achakale, then Mashiach's going to come. Where's the logic in that? So Alter Rebbe says, it could be different be'yirah, but the be'yirah of Alter Rebbe over here is, Mashiach comes when we move away from Das. Mashiach is not about Das. Mashiach is not about a love for Hashem, which is a logical love. That's Chitzonius love. Mashiach comes when we're moving to higher, when we move away from Das. That's Mashiach. When we're able to access the Pnimius Halev, that Avet Hashem, which is higher than Das, that's Mashiach. That's Ben David. L'chein Mashiach ba b'hesach hadas l'kol Yisrael. Mashiach comes b'hesach hadas v'yigili b'chinas nekuda pnimis haklalos, because Mashiach is the revelation of the nekuda pnimis haklalos, the general nekuda of the neshama of all of Klal Yisrael, v'yitzias hashchina, and the shchina leaving the shchina haklalos, the general shchina magalus v'ashivya, from its galus, where it is la'adu l'ol mi'alamim, forever and ever. So what have we established up until now? We've established this idea that we started off with the question about why Mashiach comes to tzedakah. We don't have the answer yet to that question.
We'll get to that.
With that, Mr. Hashem, we will get there. But we've talked about the idea of, we now know what there's Pnimius Halev, we know what Chitzonius Halev is, we know what Geula is. Geula is the redemption of the Pnimius Halev. We also now know that Geula is synonymous with which mitzvah? The mitzvah of Brismilla, right? The idea of Brismilla is really is the same idea, the idea of taking off the Arla and revealing the Bris. And this is for Klal Yisrael. And Emir Hashem, as we continue, we'll talk about how also every single Yid experiences Geula on a daily basis, and we're going to apply this, which we're talking about in general, we're going to apply it to the particular.
So what about the great Ro'eh Lot?
The what?
The Ro'im, the shepherd of Lot, met a Brit with the other Ro'im that they were taking their part. So what this to do with the future?
No, I really don't understand the question. We'll talk after class, okay? So, as is our nature, that we try to connect in Yonam to the Parsha. So we have this week the Parsha, and also this Shabbos. We are right now standing on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom HaKodesh of Shiri B'Shvat, Yud Shvat, the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Rayatz. So we need to connect everything. So what is the connection of Brismilla to our Parsha? So we know that when were the Eden, when did they have their Brismilla? On the night when they went out of Mitzrayim, which is described in this week's Parsha. So we have over here a Rashi in our Parsha, and Perik Yud Beis Pasuk Vav, where Rashi says, Hoya Ramasya ben Charash Omer. Ramasya ben Charash would say, Harehu Omer. The pasuk says in Yecheskel, "Ve'ever alayich ve'erich v'hine itech is doidim." Hashem says, "I pass over you, and I see that the time has come. The time has come for our love to blossom." Higia shvua shenishbati laVram. The time has come for the shvua which I have promised Avram, she'egal azbanav, that I will redeem his children. So Hashem says the time has come for me to fulfill my promise to my beloved one. But the Yidden don't have mitzvahs in order to be redeemed. Shenemar, as the pasuk says over there in Yecheskel, va'at edim ve'eria. Hashem says to Yidden, I see you guys are naked of mitzvahs. So what did Hashem do? V'notzan lahem shtei mitzvahs. Hashem gives them two mitzvahs: dam Pesach, v'dam Mila, shemalu ba'isei alayla. The Yidden were mal on that night, so they had two mitzvahs. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, misbeisesach b'demayach. I see ve'era eisach misbeisesach b'demayach, that you are soaking in your blood, not soaking, whatever, you're rolling in blood. B'demayach b'shnei dam, in two bloods. And I'm skipping a line. Shehoyu shtufim be'alilim. Also, the Yidden at that time they were shatuf and avodah zarah. They were
39.
Sunk in avodah zarah. Amalem, he says, Mishchu kulachem, pull away from avodah zarah kulachem and take the carbon pesach. Mishchu yidechem be'alilim, pull away from avodah zarah kulachem tzen shel mitzvah, and take the sheep for a mitzvah, because we know that at that time the avodah zarah was the sheep. So withdraw from your avodah zarah and instead use the sheep for a carbon pesach. So in a sikha from the Rebbe in Parshas Boy in the year Tafshin Lamed Zayin 1977. So the Rebbe spoke about this Rashi. As we know that the Rebbe's Rashi sikhas are a very famous genre of sikhas, where the Rebbe takes a Rashi and attacks it with a buzzsaw, and will ask anywhere between 10 and 20 questions on the Rashi, and totally deconstructs the Rashi, and then the Rebbe provides a general idea and then proceeds to reconstruct. Yeah, so they're works of art. So this is one of those sikhas, the Rashi sikha. The Rebbe asks many questions on this Rashi, which I'm not going to get into it. We also didn't read the entire Rashi. I want to focus on three questions that the Rebbe asks. Question number one is, Hashem says he sees that the Yidden are naked of mitzvahs, so what does he give them? He gives them two mitzvahs. Mitzvah of Milah and the mitzvah of Karban Pesach. 1 second. If the problem is that they don't have any mitzvahs, they need a mitzvah, so give them one mitzvah. Why isn't one mitzvah enough? And if one mitzvah is enough because you need to have a variety, then why two? Why not three? Why not six? Why not eight?
Easy mitzvah. Give them easy mitzvah.
Okay, that's another question. Maybe we'll answer that also. But this whole two, they're naked. So give them two mitzvahs. In other words, a person who has two mitzvahs is still pretty naked, right? Elamai, you're going to say one mitzvah is enough. So if one, why two? What's the cheshbon of two? Another question, which the Rebbe asks very often on Rashi, is, we know Rashi brings down Mamari Chazal all the time, and he does not always quote the name of the person who he's bringing it down. Why over here does Rashi mention that this comes from Ramasya ben Charash? And the Rebbe points out something interesting. The beginning, Rashi says, Hoyer Ramasya ben Charash Reimer, and he gives the whole thing. And then with Rashi, in the last lines of Rashi, Ushahoyu Shtufim Be'alilim, the source is in the same Medrash, the same Mechilta, and that line is from a different Tana, Reb Shimon HaKapar. And yet Rashi doesn't say Reb Shimon HaKapar. He quotes only Ramasya ben Charash. In the same Rashi, he quotes two Mamari Chazal, one with a name, one without a name, which that right away tells you there's something going on over here. Why is he quoting the name? The Rebbe always would explain that the name adds a little context over here. For some, a subtle question that the student has, the name is going to add context. We'll see in a moment what that is. And furthermore, the Rebbe goes, because the Rebbe is medayik in every word. The wording is strange. Hoyer Ramasya ben Charash Reimer. Ramasya ben Charash would say, whoa, what is the normal way of saying something of the sort? Ramasya ben Charash Reimer. Or Amar Ramasya ben Charash.
What's higher?
What is Hoyer Ramasya ben Charash Reimer? Ramasya ben Charash would say, it's almost like empirical. Yeah, but why is that? But again, Rashi, when he quotes, he doesn't say that. I was just going to say it's in Pirkei Avos, but yeah, over here, why is that negate to explain it? He's always one that wants to say what he used to say it. In other words, in Rashi over here, why is he saying that over here in this Rashi? Rashi always quotes from Mamari Chazal. He doesn't say Hoya Omer, Amar this, Amar that. And Rashi doesn't stick to the Lashon Medrash either. Rashi rewrites everything in a way which is negated to the Rashi. So the Rebbe explains. The Yidden are about to go out of Mitzrayim. And going out of Mitzrayim is a two pronged process. Remember when I say a dual process. One is Sur Meira, and one is Asay Toiv. They need to leave Mitzrayim. That's Sur Meira. Mitzrayim, the physical place of Mitzrayim, and also all that Mitzrayim represents spiritually, the Ervas Haaretz. But that's not all. The point of Mitzrayim is not only that they should go out of Mitzrayim, Sur Meira, but as we know that Shalach Hasami V'Yavduni, the purpose was that Beitziach Es Ha'am Hazeh Mitzrayim Tavdun Es Olakim Al Ha'ar Hazeh, the Yidden, they go out of Mitzrayim and they serve Hashem. That's the Asay Toiv. Hashem, the time has come for Hashem to redeem the Yidden. And Hashem looks and says, oh wow, they want me to do this all alone? At the Eirim area, you have nothing. Not in Sur Meira, not in Asay Toiv. You guys garnished. Can't be. Can't be. I'll schlep you out of Mitzrayim, I'll give you the Torah, but you have to do the first move. You can't be Eirim area, you can't be naked. So he gave them two mitzvahs. One of them was Sur Meira, one of them is Asay Toiv. The mitzvah of Brismilla is Asay Toiv. And the mitzvah of Karban Pesach is Sur Meira. Why is it Sur Meira? Because it was Avodah Zarah. That's what he says. There's Shtuf Avodah Zarah. Mishchu Kulachem. You have to pull away from Avodah Zarah. So the Toichen, the inner dimension of the mitzvah of Karban Pesach is Avodah Zarah, and the Toichen of Damilas is Asay Toiv. And suddenly the Yidden aren't Eirim Ve'eria. They've laid the foundation, the seeds, for both things. Sai for leaving Mitzrayim, and Sai for receiving the Torah. They're not Eirim Ve'eria, they're not naked anymore. Maybe also Eirim Ve'eria, the two words, the double wording on Eirim Ve'eria is because they're naked both on Sur Meira and also on Asay Toiv. This is what the Rebbe says. Now, I was thinking that based on what we're learning over here in this Tanya, also we can add that perhaps it wasn't just two random mitzvahs, one in Asay Toiv and one in Sur Meira. We understand Avodah Zarah is the most fundamental Sur Meira there is, the most fundamental Aveira that there is Avodah Zarah. Hashem says, abandon Avodah Zarah. And as we learned on the Kuti Amarim in the earlier prakim, in a small way, every Aveira is Avodah Zarah. Al-Tabba talks about that at length in prakim Chaf through Chaf Dalet. Every Aveira is Avodah Zarah. To put it in different words, every Aveira is an Avodah which is Zarah. It's a service which is foreign from our service of Hashem. And as a Yid, we're always asked, Mila Hashem Elah, you're in or you're out? If you're out, you're doing an Aveda, it's Aveda Zarah. You're in, serving Hashem. So it's a fundamental Sur Meira mitzvah. And Brismilla, as we just learned now in Tanya, is a fundamental Asay Toiv. What is Brismilla? Brismilla is about revealing that essential Ava for Hashem, which is the source for all mitzvahs. So the two mitzvahs that Hashem gave the Yidden are not only individual mitzvahs, they also happen to be fundamental mitzvahs. A fundamental mitzvah in the area of Sur Meira Avodah Zarah, a fundamental mitzvah in Asay Toiv, which is Brismilla, which is why also the Brismilla is done at 8 days. It's the Yisoid of the Avodah, revealing this Avos Hashem. But then the Rebbe says, at the end of the day, the Ben Chamish Lemikra, this child who is learning Chumash, still asking, really? Is it that important? And what if Hashem just brings the Gula and the Yidden are Eirim Ve'eria, so they're naked? The Eibishter will give them the clothing. How important is that? So therefore, the Rashi brings down this memory in the name of Ramasya ben Charash. Who is Ramasya ben Charash? The Gemara says in Masechtas Sanhedrin, the Ramasya ben Charash, he had a yeshiva in, of all places, in Rome, in the city of Rome. He was a contemporary of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus. He was a generation and a half after Rabbi Akiva. And of all places to establish a yeshiva, he established it in Rome. I'm trying to think of a modern day parallel of where I don't know. What? Las Vegas. I don't know. Hey, what?
Las Vegas has a yeshiva.
Okay. In other words, in Rome, the seat of Muhammad of Edom. And he had, by the way, the biggest yeshiva of his time was by him. What a strange place. So Hoya Ramasya ben Charash Omer. Ramasya ben Charash would constantly tell his Talmidim and tell them, he'd be menachem them. They're in Rome. They're not in Eretz Yisrael. You want to know why we're in Rome? Because they're Yidden in Rome. Pasha, there are Yidden who were in Rome, they were taken there. And these Yidden are Edom area.
That's why it says Hoya.
Yeah.
Always.
Why are we? You're always telling us Talmidim. These Yidden are Edom area. They don't have any mitzvahs. We're opening up a yeshiva in Rome, so that every single Yid should be able to come to the yeshiva, and every single Yid should be able to have a mitzvah. And this way we'll be able to have the Geula. Yes, this was Masi ben Choresh's. It wasn't just something he said. It was his life. His life idea was open up a yeshiva in Rome to make sure that there is no Yid which is Edom area. And the Rebbe continues.
He was Chabadnik.
The Rebbe continues.
Before Chabad.
When the Rebbe said the Sikha, by the way, the Rebbe was crying. The Rebbe was very, very emotional. This Sikha, which again, Shabbos Parshas Boi, Tavshin Lamed Zayin, the Racham Stifker Rebbe was by this Farbringen.
Who's the Rebbe?
The Racham Stifker Rebbe.
Old Rachman.
Yeah. And he was blown away by the Sikha. The Rebbe was crying. And the Rebbe was saying, when Chamash Lemikra says, he says, we're in this Golos, we're in Golos Reimi, this last Golos. We already know the Gemara says, Kalo Kalak Yitzin, that all the times for Mashiach is already gone. So Yidden Tainen, Meshoinen Golos Bal Tzvei Toizent Yar. Wifel is the Shir Sumatrin Yidden and Golos. We're in Golos already 2,000 years. How long is the Eibishter matering us in Golos? So Rashi answers, if it's only a matter of taking us out of Golos, of going out of Golos, so long ago we'd have been potter from Golos. The Hashem would have taken us out. But the Eibishter wants that every single Yid should have a mitzvah. The Eibishter doesn't want we should be Erev area. And just like by the Yitzias Mitzrayim, when even though he get that Eis Doidim, the time came, and the Eibishter says, you need to have mitzvahs, the same thing is also today. We need to make sure that every single Yid has a mitzvah. And this is how the Rebbe connects us to Yud Shvat. The Frierdiker Rebbe, his yard site is Yud Shvat, and he passed away on Shabbos Parshas Boi, which is this Shabbos when we read this Rashi. And that was the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe set up shop in Reimi. And he opened up yeshiva in every single Reimi around the world. And the purpose of it is to make sure that every single Yid does a mitzvah. Because the time for Mashiach to come, long time ago. What are we waiting for? There's a Yid out there who's Edom area. There's a Yid out there who hasn't done a mitzvah. And when every single Yid does a mitzvah, we're going out of Golos. That was the koch of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which obviously was carried on in later years by the Rebbe in a greater exponential form. And the Rebbe points to a Sikha, which the Frierdiker Rebbe said in Purim of 1931, 90 years ago, where the Frierdiker Rebbe said, brings down the pasuk, Kisira Oreim v'chisisei. If you see someone who is naked, you should cover him. Don't hide from your next of kin, from your blood. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "As mizet ayida naketin on tzitzis and on tefillin v'chisisoi." You see a yid who's naked. What does it mean naked? He doesn't have tzitzis. He doesn't have tefillin. Go do that. And that's why the Frierdiker Rebbe wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. People always ask, why did the Frierdiker Rebbe in America? Why is the Rebbe in America? Why didn't the Rebbe go to Eretz Yisrael? Because the Kermasya ben Choresh, the Rebbe was in Reimi, to make sure that every single Yid has a mitzvah. And now here we are, Yud Shvat, 70 years later, and the job still, we're close, but the job still has to be done. And that's the challenge of this Yud Shvat, every single one of us. Do you know a mitzvah? Do you know a Yid who needs a mitzvah? Go do a mitzvah with another Yid. That's why we're in Reimi, to make sure that there is no Yid which is the Erev area. At the end of the day, no Jew will be left behind. Every Yid is coming along. Be mezaka another Yid and another Yid with a mitzvah, and Taka will see very soon. We'll Taka see an end to Reimi, and as the pasuk says, that the Eibishter says that he sees that the Eis Doidim, time for the Geula, we should be zeicher to that now, mamish. Shabbos.
That was written in Yiddish.